The nights on Mustafar had no mercy. They did not cool. They did not soften. They did not offer the small kindness of sleep without dreams. The lava seas boiled like an open wound beneath the black glass plains, and the fortress above them drank the heat the way a starving thing drank light. In the highest chamber, where the walls were obsidian and the air smelled faintly of scorched metal, Darth Vader sat alone. His breathing was the only rhythm left in his life. In, out. The machine insisted on survival with a patience that felt like cruelty. Across from him, kneeling near the edge of the chamber, where the heat was less savage, was a child. Not a prisoner in chains, not a servant with a collar. Nothing so simple. The Emperor called the child an asset, an uncut stone the dark side could shape into a blade. Vader called the child nothing at all. He never spoke the child's name, as if naming would make it real, and reality was something he had lost long ago. But the child listened. The child was force-sensitive in the way a candle is sensitive to wind, trembling at every shift in the unseen. Vader could feel that tremble. He could feel the child feel him. That was why he kept the child here. Not for training, for witness. Every night when the fortress dimmed and the storm outside snarled against the spires, Vader would speak. Sometimes aloud, sometimes through the Force, sometimes in that narrow place between sound and thought where memory lived like a parasite. He always began the same way. This is how I loved her. The child never asked who. The child never dared. But the child's presence was a quiet kind of courage. And in that courage, the story poured out of Vader the way blood pours out of a cut you can't stop pressing. This is how I loved her, he said again, and the chamber seemed to tighten around the words, as if the stone itself wanted to listen. His gloved hand lifted, palm open, as if he could hold the past there. And in the darkness behind his mask, Anakin Skywalker opened the door he had welded shut. They sent him to a world whose name tasted like ash, a campaign the Council called necessary, a front that needed a general who moved fast and hit hard, because speed was the difference between victory and the kind of loss that hollowed out battalions. He arrived with the 501st, and with him came the familiar weight of expectation, the chosen one, the hero with no fear, the blade the Republic pointed at its problems. He expected commanders. He expected bureaucracy. He expected grim, exhausted Jedi who had forgotten how to smile. He did not expect her. She stood at the edge of a crater where the ground had been melted into a bowl of glass, blue skin catching the thin light like a fragment of sky that had fallen and refused to be dirty. Her leku were wrapped back, practical. Her lightsaber was unlit, but the way she held herself made it feel already drawn. Aalya Secura turned as he approached, and the air shifted. Not in the Force, not like a warning, like a breeze finding an open window. Skywalker, she said, and there was amusement in it, mild and sharp at the same time. I heard you were dramatic. Anakin stopped a little too close. He meant to keep distance. He always meant to. Instead, he smiled as if he had been waiting for a fight he could enjoy. And I heard. You were impossible to impress, he said. Alya's eyes narrowed in a way that could have been annoyance, could have been interest. That depends on what you bring. He glanced at the smoking crater, then at the scattered droid parts, then back at her. A lot of trouble. Good, she said. I was getting bored. That was how it started. Not with vows. Not with stolen kisses in quiet hallways. With banter on a battlefield, where death listened from the shadows, and the only rebellion left to them was laughter. They fought together, and the war learned to fear the shape of them side by side. Anakin was force and fury, a storm made flesh. Alia was precision, a dancer with a blade, moving with calm that made the chaos around her look clumsy. Between strikes and commands, between the roar of gunfire and the whistle of artillery, they found each other in small, reckless moments. A sparring match at dawn, when the clones were asleep and the air was cold enough to sting. A shared canteen of water after a sprint through wreckage, both of them breathless, both of them smiling like it mattered. Alia leaning against a transport hull while Anakin repaired a cracked piece of armor plating, her voice dry as she teased him about his habit of improvising disasters into victories. "You always do that," she said once, watching him work. "Win," he replied without looking up. "Pretend you meant to do it." He looked up then, wiping grease on his glove. "Maybe I did." Alya's mouth curved. "Maybe you're lying. Maybe I'm talented." She laughed, and the sound hit him like a sudden warmth, in a place he thought had gone numb. Padmé's laughter was sunlight through curtains, soft and rare and precious. Alya's laughter was firelight in a trench, bright and dangerous and alive. He didn't plan to fall. He didn't choose to. It happened the way a ship drifts toward a gravity well, without realizing it's already doomed. He noticed the way she watched the battlefield, not with fear, but with sorrow she refused to indulge. He noticed the way she treated the clones as people, not as pieces on a board. He noticed that she never flinched when he got angry, never tried to soothe him with lies. She simply stood there, steady, as if daring him to look at the darkness in himself without blinking. One night, after a long day of pushing droids back across a ridge, the fighting quieted. The camp settled into a cautious hush. The stars above were thin, distant, like the universe had retreated out of politeness. Anakin found Alia sitting alone on a rock beyond the perimeter. Her boots were dusted with ash. Her shoulders were slumped not from weakness, but from the weight of surviving too many days like this. He sat beside her without asking. For a while, they said nothing. The wind carried the scent of burnt metal, and something faintly floral from a crushed plant nearby, a reminder that life still insisted on being present. Alia spoke first. "You hate being still," she said. Anakin's jaw tightened. "I don't hate it." "You do," she replied gently, and it annoyed him because she was right. He stared at the horizon, where the land rose in jagged shadows. "If I'm still, I think." Alya's voice softened. "And if you think, you feel." He turned toward her, a sharp movement like he meant to bite. "Feelings are not the problem." Alia looked at him with that infuriating calm. "No," she said. "Fear is." Something in his chest lurched, like a door had opened where there shouldn't have been one. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to laugh it off. Instead, he heard himself speak, raw and quiet. "I'm afraid all the time." Alia didn't gasp. She didn't recoil. She didn't offer him a lecture about attachment. She simply nodded, as if he'd finally said something honest. "So am I," she said. Anakin swallowed. "Then why do you look like you're not?" Alya's eyes stayed on the stars. Because if I look afraid, my soldiers will be afraid. And if they are afraid, they die. He stared at her profile, the line of her cheek, the way her leku rested against her shoulder like a sigh. You're stronger than me, he said before he could stop himself. Alya's mouth curved, not amused this time. No, she said. I'm just better at hiding it. That night, Anakin reached toward her in the Force without meaning to. A gentle brush, like testing if something was real. Alia felt it. Her head turned slightly, eyes sliding to him with a warning wrapped in tenderness. Don't, she murmured. Anakin's voice was rough. Why? Alya's gaze held his, steady and sad. Because you will not be able to stop. He should have listened. He didn't. The war separated them the way the war separated everything. Orders came down from Coruscant. New fronts, new emergencies, new fires to throw themselves into. Anakin left with the 5-0 first, his departure sudden and sharp, like a blade pulled from a wound. Alia stayed where she was needed, where her calm and precision kept whole systems from collapsing into chaos. They did not say goodbye the way lovers said goodbye. They stood in the hangar under harsh lights, ships rumbling, clones moving crates and checking blasters, the whole world busy pretending a feelings didn't exist. Anakin approached her too fast. He wanted to grab her hand. He wanted to pull her somewhere private and seal the distance with his mouth. Instead, he stopped in front of her like a proper Jedi. Alia tilted her head. Be careful, she said. Anakin's eyes flashed. I'm always careful. Alya's smile was small. No, she said. You're always brave. Those are not the same. His throat tightened. He wanted to say it then. I love you. It was already carved into him, already bleeding into every thought. But Padmé existed like a promise tied around his ribs, a secret marriage hidden beneath his armor. Duty existed like a chain the council pretended was a belt. So he said the only thing he could say, without shattering the life he was balancing on lies. May the Force be with you, he whispered. Alya's gaze softened, and her voice was so quiet, it almost disappeared into the hangar noise. And with you, she replied. Then, after a pause, she added, always. He left, and the silence that followed him felt like a missing limb. After that, he wrote to her. Not through official channels. Not in messages that could be traced or intercepted. He recorded hollows he never sent, his face lit by the blue glow of the projector, his expression rawer than he allowed anyone to see. Sometimes he spoke aloud, words meant for her but poured into empty air. Sometimes he pressed the thoughts into the Force like folded notes, hiding them in places he imagined she might feel, in the hush between battles, in the quiet before sleep, in the moment when she ignited her saber and felt the blade hum like a heartbeat. He told her about the missions, about the victories that tasted like dust. He told her about the nightmares, though he disguised them as jokes. He told her he missed her voice. He told her, in 100 different ways, that he was unraveling, and she was the thread that made him believe he could be stitched back together. Alia wrote back in her own way, not with desperate floods of emotion, with brief holos recorded in the dim light of a field tent, her face smudged with ash, her eyes tired, her voice steady. She spoke of strategy, of losses she refused to soften with comforting lies, and sometimes in the pause between sentences, in the way her gaze lingered on the lens, as if she could see him through it. She offered him something more honest than poetry. Be safe. Don't burn yourself out. Remember to eat. I felt you today. He clung to those words like a starving man clung to crumbs. The Order sensed something, because the Order always sensed what it didn't want to name. Whispers in the temple halls. A glance from Obi-Wan that lingered a second too long. A quiet comment from a master about Anakin's unusual attachments to his fellow Jedi. But the Order was cracking under the weight of war, under politics, under arrogance. It ignored fractures the way a dam ignored hairline breaks, convinced it was too strong to fail. Padmé remained in the background like a sun Anakin orbited out of obligation. She was stability, legitimacy. The life he was allowed to dream of. A senator's apartment, a secret ring, the illusion of normal. But Alia was truth. Alia was the person who had seen him with dirt under his nails, and rage in his eyes and had not turned away. He began to understand something that terrified him. With Padmé, he was hiding. With Alia, he was seen. That was more dangerous than any battle. They reunited after a campaign so brutal, even the clones looked older when it was over. A planet where the ground itself seemed to hate them, where every step was a negotiation with death. Anakin arrived first, anger already simmering beneath his skin, his hands shaking with exhaustion he refused to admit. Alia arrived later, stepping off her transport with a grace that felt like defiance. Their eyes met across the landing pad, and the world tilted. Anakin walked to her like he couldn't stop himself. Alya's voice was calm. You're hurt. I'm fine, he snapped. Alya's eyes narrowed. Anakin! Hearing his name from her mouth like that, without rank, without title, made something inside him break. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward a maintenance corridor, away from the clones, away from the officers, away from the war pretending to be their whole lives. Alia didn't resist. She followed, but her posture was rigid, like she was bracing for impact. In the narrow corridor, lit by dim emergency strips, Anakin turned on her. He was too close. His breathing was too fast. I can't do this, he said, voice shaking with fury that had nowhere to go. I can't keep pretending this is nothing. Alya's jaw tightened. Then stop pretending. Anakin stared, stunned by the simplicity. You don't understand, he said, because that was what he always said to everyone. Alia stepped closer. I do, she replied. That's the problem. He swallowed, and his voice dropped into something almost broken. I think about you every day. Alya's eyes flickered, pain and longing and fear all tangled together. And I think about you, she admitted, and the honesty in it was like a blade sliding between his ribs. Anakin's hands lifted, hovering near her shoulders as if he didn't trust himself to touch. I'm tired, he whispered. I'm tired of being what they want me to be. Alya's voice softened. Then don't be. The words hung there. Then Anakin did something reckless, something human. He touched her. Not with the Force, with his hands. His palms on her arms, warm through fabric and skin, grounding him in a reality he had almost forgotten. Alya's breath caught. Anakin leaned in slowly, giving her the chance to stop him. She didn't. Their mouths met, and the kiss was not gentle. It was desperate. It was years of restraint breaking like glass. It was all the unsent messages, all the stolen glances, all the nights in separate quarters staring at ceilings and pretending they weren't haunted. When they finally pulled apart, Alia rested her forehead against his, eyes closed. "This is dangerous," she whispered. Anakin laughed, harsh and shaking. "Everything is dangerous." Alia opened her eyes. "You don't get to say that like it's an excuse." Anakin's throat tightened. "I don't want an excuse," he said. I want a life." Alia stared at him, and for a moment she looked like she might cry, though she didn't let the tears fall. "A life," she repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Anakin nodded. "After the war," he said, and hope surged in him like a drug. "After it ends, we could leave. We could disappear. You and me." Alia's face went still, like a door closing halfway. "Anakin," she said carefully. He rushed on, words tumbling. "We could go somewhere no one knows us. Somewhere the Order can't reach. Somewhere the Council can't tell us what we're allowed to feel. I could stop being a weapon." Alia's gaze hurt. "And what about what you're already holding?" she asked. Anakin froze, because there it was. The other life. The secret marriage. The promises bound in fear and longing and obligation. Padmé. Alia didn't say her name. She didn't need to. The truth sat between them like a third presence, heavy and unavoidable. Anakin's hands fell away from her arms. His mouth tasted like ash. "I can't," he began. Alia's voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. "You can," she said. "You just don't want to choose." Anakin flinched as if struck. He wanted to protest. He wanted to insist it wasn't that simple. But it was. He was terrified of loss. Terrified of shattering the fragile stability he had built on lies. Terrified that if he chose truth, the universe would punish him for it, the way it always seemed to. He stepped back, the distance between them suddenly immense. Alia watched him, and something in her expression shifted into acceptance so sorrowful it felt like mercy. "You're afraid," she said quietly. Not accusation. Observation. Anakin swallowed hard. "If I love something," he whispered, "it dies." Alia's eyes closed for a heartbeat, as if the words had cut her. Then she opened them, and her voice was soft as falling ash. "Then you will keep living like this," she said. "Half of you hiding, half of you burning." Anakin's chest tightened. She lifted a hand, stopping him. "No," she said. "If I beg you to stay, you'll resent me. If I force you to choose, you'll break. I won't be the thing that finally shatters you." Her voice trembled just slightly. "But don't pretend this didn't happen." Anakin's eyes stung. Alia stepped closer again, and for a moment her fingers brushed his glove, a touch so light it felt like a goodbye, disguised as kindness. "Finish the war," she whispered. "Do what you think you have to do. And if you ever become someone you can't recognize, remember there was a moment you wanted something else." Then she walked away. Anakin stood in the corridor long after she was gone, the emergency lights humming above him, like a heartbeat that wouldn't slow. He told himself he chose duty. He told himself he chose safety. But the truth was uglier. He chose fear. The war ended the way fires ended when there was nothing left to burn. Not with peace, with exhaustion, with betrayal, with an order spoken from Coruscant that turned brothers into executioners and Jedi into targets. Order 66. Anakin did not see Alia die. He did not stand on that jungle world where her troops turned on her. He did not hear her voice in person, did not see the flash of blaster bolts, did not watch her fall. But the Force did not protect him from the knowledge. He felt it. He was in the temple when it happened, moving through halls that smelled of smoke and sacred stone, his blade red and heavy, his mind screaming. In the middle of that screaming, something went quiet, like a song abruptly cut off, like a hand slipping out of his grasp. He staggered. For a heartbeat, the world blurred, and he saw blue skin under green canopy, Alia turning as if she'd heard her name, her eyes widening. Then nothing. A void. A silence that was not peace, but absence, so complete it made him sick. He pressed a hand to the wall, breathing hard, and the clones behind him shifted uncertainly. He wanted to ask, what was that? He wanted to reach for her through the Force the way he always had, like finding a familiar thread. But there was no thread. There was only severance. He swallowed the sound that tried to claw its way out of his throat. He kept moving, because he was already falling, and there was no room left in the fall for grief. Later, when he became Vader, when the armor sealed him into a walking tomb, when the Emperor's praise tasted like poison, when the galaxy learned to fear his shape, Alia remained a ghost he never spoke of. Padmé was the wound everyone knew, the one that bled openly in his rage. Alia was quieter. Alia was the crack beneath everything else, the one that didn't show until the whole structure collapsed. No argument, no closure, no goodbye. Just a sudden clean amputation. And the pain of it never dulled, because there had been no final moment to hold on to. Only almost. Only the tragedy of a life that might have been, if fear hadn't been his master, long before the Sith ever were. In the meditation chamber on Mustafar, Vader's voice faltered. The child across from him remained still, eyes wide, breath shallow, as if afraid any movement would break the fragile thing happening in the room. Vader's gloved hand curled into a fist. "This is why I tell it," he said, and the words were rough, scraped raw from somewhere deep. Not because it changes anything, not because it saves her. His breathing hissed. "I tell it because it is the only part of me that wasn't a lie." The child's voice finally emerged, small and trembling. Do you feel her still?" Vader's head turned slowly, the mask unreadable, but the Force around him shifting like a storm, deciding whether to strike. "For a long time," he said, "I felt only absence." He paused as if the next words cost more than pain. "And then," he whispered, "I began to feel memory." The chamber seemed to dim, as if even the fortress leaned closer to listen. Vader's posture slackened just slightly, like a man too tired to keep pretending he was made of iron. "In the Force," he said, "there are places where the past lingers, echoes, impressions, wounds that don't heal because someone keeps touching them." He lifted his head, and for a moment, beneath the machine, the broken man surfaced. "I touched that wound," he said, "night after night, not to hurt myself, not only to hurt myself, He swallowed. To remember that I was capable of something that wasn't destruction. The child's eyes glistened. And does she answer? Vader was silent so long the only sound was the lava far below and the steady hiss of his own lungs. Then he spoke, softer than he had spoken all night. Sometimes, he said, the Force is kind. His gloved fingers opened, palm up, as if offering something invisible. And sometimes, he continued, it lets you see what you lost. Not as it ended, but as it was. The world around him shifted, not the chamber. Though the child gasped, feeling the change, it was inside Vader. Inside Anakin. The heat of Mustafar faded into something gentle. The hiss of the respirator became distant, like a sound from another room. He stood in a place that had never existed, and yet felt more real than any throne, any battlefield, any corridor of the temple. A horizon stretched wide beneath a sky washed in soft color. The air smelled clean, like water and grass after rain. There were no ships, no blaster fire, no screams in the Force. Only quiet. Alia sat on a low ridge, legs folded, hands resting loosely on her knees. Her leku fell over her shoulders, unbound. Her expression was peaceful in a way Anakin had rarely seen her allow. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes warmed with recognition. Not surprise, as if she had been waiting without impatience. Anakin stopped a few steps away, suddenly unsure how to exist without armor, without titles, without the weight of everything he had done. Alia smiled softly. You found your way here, she said. His throat tightened. I don't know how. Alia patted the ground beside her. Sit, she invited. He hesitated. Then he sat. The grass bent beneath him like it welcomed his weight. The wind brushed his face like a gentle hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Anakin stared at the horizon, his chest aching with the strangest kind of grief. Grief not only for her death, but for the life they never reached. Alia's voice finally broke the silence. You always hated being still, she said, the same gentle teasing from that night under the stars long ago. Anakin let out a shaky laugh, and the sound startled him because it was human. I still do, he admitted. Alia's gaze slid to him, soft and knowing. And yet, she said, you're here. He turned to her, and the words he had carried like stones finally rose, unguarded. I'm sorry, he whispered. Alia watched him for a long moment, and her expression held sorrow. Yes, but no condemnation. I know, she said simply. Anakin's eyes burned. I was afraid, he confessed. I chose fear over you. Alia's hand lifted, and her fingers brushed his cheek with impossible gentleness. You chose what you thought would keep you alive, she said. Anakin's voice cracked. It didn't. Alia's eyes shimmered, but her smile remained. No, she agreed. It didn't. Another silence, but it was not a cruel silence. It was the kind of silence that let wounds breathe. Anakin's shoulders sagged. I never said goodbye, he whispered. Alia's fingers traced a line along his jaw, as if learning him again. Then say what you need to say, she murmured. Anakin closed his eyes and the words came out like a prayer. I loved you, he said. I loved you in the middle of war. I loved you when I wasn't brave enough to deserve it. I loved you even when I pretended I didn't. He opened his eyes, looking at her as if she were the only real thing left in the universe. I loved you, he repeated, and the simplicity of it hurt. And I never stopped. Alya's smile trembled, and at last, a tear slid down her cheek like a small, shining surrender. I know, she whispered again. Then she leaned her forehead against his. In that gentle contact, Anakin felt something he hadn't felt since before the fall. Forgiveness. Not for what he had done. Not in a way that erased it, but in a way that reminded him he had once been a man who could feel, who could love, who could want peace. They sat together, watching the horizon that never existed in life, and the quiet wrapped around them like a blanket. In the distant chamber on Mustafar, the child watched Vader's posture soften, watched the storm around him ease, felt something like warmth radiate from the darkness. Vader's breathing still hissed, the machines still insisted, but in the Force, somewhere beyond heat and stone, Anakin Skywalker sat beside the woman he had almost chosen, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to remember love not as weakness, but as proof. Proof that he had once been human. And in that proof, the wound that refused to close finally stopped bleeding. Not because it vanished, because it was seen, because it was held, because at last he let the memory live without letting it kill him. This is how I loved her, Vader whispered into the dark. And the child, trembling, understood that the story was not a confession. It was survival.